Bold and Blonde. Welcome to the Mindset Evolution podcast. The podcast to get tools for a powerful mind you can use immediately every day. Get tips, tricks, skills, and inspiration to create what you desire and achieve a content life wherever you are. And here are your hosts, Kathi and Daisy.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bold and Blonde Mindset Evolution, the podcast that gives you tools for a powerful mind. I'm Kathi, your host from Australia, and with me, as always, is Daisy Pap, your host from America. Hi, Daisy.
Hello, dear Kathi down under. I'm so glad to see you, and I'm very glad that we are recording season 7. And thank you to our supporters, because listeners like you help us remain on air. Please continue supporting us, because we're serving the world. We do it with everything we have and everything we can from the bottom of our hearts. And please continue supporting us. Thank you.
I have a good episode for us to talk about today, Daisy, and it's one I think many people throughout the world will relate to and may even find themselves doing from time to time. We're going to talk about excuses.
Excuse me? Oh, okay. Excuses. In which regard would you like to discuss excuses? When I excuse myself, or when I'm trying to find excuses so I don't do, or I don't follow through, or I'm just not going to do what I planned on doing? Which of the excuses you'd like to speak about today?
Well, obviously the second one, because that's the juicier of the two. I particularly want to talk about it in the context of when we have a reason for not doing something, but it sounds like an excuse.
Okay.
So maybe that's the difference between a justification and an excuse, perhaps. We should probably start by defining what excuses are. I think you probably gave a few examples there in your opener.
Well, I think it is very interesting how you put it, so that when we have a reason to not do something that we were planning on doing, then that it slips into justification, or that then we're excusing it and we try to reason it. So that, I think, already is a great stretch to have a discussion about. Well, what are excuses?
Yeah, well, to me, they're a way to get out of doing something.
Okay.
And there's not really that justification behind it. I would say it's just an excuse, in that the result is somebody probably being let down. And maybe that's what makes it an excuse, as compared to if you have a reasonable reason for not doing something. Genuinely, maybe you have to go to the doctors all of a sudden, and so you can't make your meeting. Or does the other person on the other end of this, do they feel like it's an excuse because they don't believe you've got to go to the doctors? So maybe part of it being an excuse is also the perception of the receiver.
Possibly. Now, I like to put some spotlight on the part that I heard you say, if I understood you correctly, that there is an excuse that may be perceived as an excuse, although there is none, because we cannot really justify it, something along these lines. Now, I then put the spotlight on the inner conflict, because when I want to really do something, but then I find an excuse for it, priorities never lie. So what are the underlying inner conflicts that hold me back?
Yes, I agree. I think that's the right direction to take here. But I particularly want to also discuss that other person, because you can make an excuse for yourself. I would probably call that procrastination. If you're making an excuse in your own life that you didn't get something done that you should have got done, to me, that's a bit of procrastination, because you've put it off knowing full well you could have done it. So you're making excuses with yourself. But when there's more than one party involved, let's use me and you as an example. Let's say that we were booked to record today and I messaged you and said, I'm not feeling well. The sheep next door really loud and I didn't sleep very well. So these things may be true for me, but also would they really stop me doing it? And would you perceive that to be justified that we put off the recording, or would it seem an excuse to you?
Well, how it seems to me is very specific and it's very subjective. Now, I like to communicate, and why would I at all want to record when you don't want to record? That will have an impact on the recording. So I'm out. So when you say, no, and the sheep, and I didn't sleep well, and my sheet wasn't really as ironed as I like it to be, and I had a bad dream, fine, let's not record because it will have an impact on the end product. But that's me. Now, how you think that I will perceive it is out of my control.
Maybe me thinking how you would perceive it as an excuse is also my inner guilt, that it really is an excuse and I just haven't looked at that myself, or maybe I even know that I'm doing that, but I still don't want to do it.
Well, I leave you with your shoebox full of excuses. I don't deal with it. I'm not getting into it. It's yours. Requires some self-discipline and requires knowing how to not take it personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I guess this topic idea came from me remembering something that happened in my marriage many years ago, where it didn't matter what I said, it was always perceived as an excuse. And I felt that was very unfair to me and very frustrating, because then it got to the point that it felt like it didn't matter what I felt or wanted. It was always going to be perceived as an excuse. Now, of course, I didn't know about the shoebox theory back then. That would have been super helpful. But that's the context and where I'm coming from, because I think that's probably happening to other relationships around the world.
Yes, most likely. Now, I think that it is important to note that how you perceive my doings have nothing to do with my doings, but solely have to do with your perception and maybe a certain amount of filling in your resentment bucket towards me. Let's say every single time when we want to record, I come up with some excuse, as you name it in this context, but maybe it's very real. Maybe I didn't sleep. Maybe I don't feel well. Maybe I don't have a voice, because it can happen to all of us that we have a little bit sound box issues or nasal sounds coming out when we speak. So maybe you perceive it as such. The main thing is for me to know that it's not an excuse. When I am clean and clear within myself and with myself, no matter how you try to blame me or shame me or guilt me, it will just, like having a good raincoat and then it drizzles and the drops they roll off of me. It's yours. When you have trust issues and you believe that I'm just making up stories because that's what you're used to, doesn't make me get used to it. And that's my business that I be trustworthy. That's none of your business. It's my business. And when I work on being trustworthy, you get the benefits. It's the other way around.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you bring up. And I feel like you've hit a nail on the head with that.
Yes, I did it again.
At the bottom of this is really a trust issue. And I can see that perhaps there would be a trust of oneself in here, as well as a trust issue between two people. And as we've talked about in the episode we did about trust, it comes from behavior. Trust is built on what behavior is between two people when it's built over time. Am I correct in saying that?
I would agree.
Agree? Yeah. If there isn't that trust element, I can see very easily how there would be this mismatch of understanding between the two parties. And that would then perhaps cause these misperceptions of each other's
interactions,
motivations.
Okay.
Mistrust of the real motivation for somebody. Let's say there's a marriage and one party has reneged on an agreement. So maybe they had an agreement they were going to go and have a dinner date. And at the last minute, one of the parties has declined, oh, I've got a headache, I've had a bad day, I'm really tired, I don't feel like going out into the public. If there was trust between them, I feel like the other partner would offer empathy and understanding and go, that's horrible if you've had a bad day. Let's stay home and we'll cook something together, or I'll cook for you. Go and have a bath. I feel like that would be an ideal kind of situation in a happy marriage. But if there isn't trust between these two parties, I could then see how there could occur a misunderstanding where one party might go, oh, she never wants to go out with me. She's always tired, or he's always tired, or he's always coming home and saying he's had a bad day, never wants to take me out, and could then use those thoughts as the road to believing it's an excuse.
Well, history oftentimes repeats itself. And when somebody is tending to make up stories to get out of situations, or because now I learned that your friend Samuel is going to be at the party, all of a sudden I have a headache. And let's say every time it's about Samuel, then next time I have diarrhea, or I hurt my mouth, or I don't have a voice anymore, I cannot go out. So whatever that might be. So that's a question then, who do I trust? Trust starts within. It's not about me trusting you. When I trust me and I know that I'm going to tell you, look, Kathi, I'm just absolutely not in the mood today. When I trust me, then I don't even assume that I cannot trust you unless you have a history of not being trustworthy in this regards. So again, it's about blaming others is so simple, but life is much simpler. We don't need to go that far. It starts here, within. The one that looks back when you look in the mirror. That's where the work can be done. Nowhere else. None of your business. You will have an impact on the dynamic with others when you make it clear within. Clean house. It's springtime here at least, so let's do a spring cleaning. And for you, maybe let's do an autumn cleaning.
Oh, I wish it was autumn. It's still the middle of summer, trust me. Okay.
Let me then go back to the excuses that when I find excuses, when I truly do, and I'm aware of making excuses. Now, where's the root? Because making excuses is the symptom. Where does it stem from?
Yes, that's why I pointed to perhaps procrastination, because it's one of those very common self-sabotages. But I'm sure that's not the only case.
Yeah, it can be procrastination. It can be also a dishonesty degree within myself. I said, yes, I'm going to do it, but then actually I only said it because I wanted to be polite or be liked or be accepted or be part of. So when I then find an excuse, again, actually, you may not like what I'm saying. Isn't it lying? When I cannot trust you that I can be honest with you and you will respect me for being honest with you. Look, Kathi, I'm just too busy in my mind and I'm just not in the mood for it. And you think it's an excuse. Oh, so now you're excusing yourself because of course it's happening again. So you see the tendencies. I'm responsible for the consistent behavior that I bring into this world. It's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is how you will respond to my behavior and how you behave in the first place. So when I find an excuse and I'm seeking for an excuse, so I have a very different issue. It's not about the excuses. It's about, so what makes me not feeling free to say what's going on truly within myself? And most people don't even know what's going on within them truly. Therefore, they make excuses. So again, it goes back to one direction, and that is inner self. Heal your inner world, organize it, reorganize it, take an inventory, get rid of the resentment bucket. Why? Because it's only wearing you down, and you will procrastinate and find excuses to clean out your house while you continue blaming others. And that's just not the right construction site where you can at all make any changes unless you force, jeopardize, or blackmail people. Force them. You change, Kathi. Who am I to make you change? I can inspire you And if you don't want to be inspired for change, bye-bye, Kathi. And now that's not an excuse.
I think that's really interesting and important that we look at what's at the bottom of it, because you're right. I think excuses are just a symptom of something bigger. And if you do this self-inventory, honestly, with yourself, you can look back at your life and see where you did make excuses for something and then really think about why. Why did I make those excuses at that time? What was really going on with me? And if I look back at mine and be honest about it, there were times where I did say yes when I didn't want to do something because, as we talked about, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in the grip of needing external validation. And all these things rolled into me. And the root of them was this lack of self-worth, this lack of confidence within myself. And so I exhibited a lot of behavior that wasn't true to myself because I didn't have my own self-belief. I didn't have that sorted out. My own inner world or my own shoebox was not sorted out. It was quite full at the time. And so I can see that sometimes I made those excuses out of initially saying yes to something I didn't really want to do. And then when it came to crunch time of when I was supposed to do them, making an excuse to not do them because I really never wanted to do them in the first place.
There you go.
And if I look at that and be honest, that was dishonest behavior. It was dishonest with myself because I wasn't being true to what I did want. And then it was being dishonest with that other person because I shouldn't have said yes to something I didn't want to do either. And it can be hard to look at yourself that honestly, and it feels a bit brutal. But actually, I believe there's quite a freedom in it. Because if you can look at yourself and be honest with yourself and trust yourself, there's a lot of freedom that comes from letting go of what other people think of you, what other people's judgments might be, what their perceptions or subjective opinions, because that's all then their shoebox. There's a very big freedom, I feel, in understanding this shoebox concept and then living it. Because at the end of the day, we are only responsible for what goes on inside us and how we behave and treat other people and how we act in the world, how we show others how to treat us. These are all such important things that I've learnt in the last few years that would have radically changed my life had I known them many years ago. It seems such a shame to learn all these things at 50 when you're like, oh, that would have been useful in my 20s.
Yeah, but this is a question of perception. You can celebrate that you know it now. Now, to our listeners who tune in for the first time, The Shoebox is an episode we did a long time ago, and you can find it in the episode list. When you go to baldandblonde.live, on the right top corner, there is a search box, and you can just type it in and you can find it, and you can also read the transcript and even play it from our website. So now let me go back to the excuses, because everything is somewhat linked together. And we are the common link. And until we do not accept, respect, or understand that, we will be more often in trouble than not. Because it is so easy to look back how we were raised or how other people treated us. For example, I always blamed others. Let's say that was the case. Oh, yeah, because it's not my responsibility. It's Johnny's fault, and it's Peter's fault, and it's Maricella's fault, and it's Maria's fault, and it's Kathi's fault. Most of it, it's your fault. It must be your fault. And if nobody else was around, then it must be your fault because you're maybe the one who's most around me. So when I come to the conclusion that that is what I'm doing, when I have that epiphany, and then nevertheless I choose not to make any changes. Now, what does that say about me? I'm making further excuses. Now, let's say, and I don't say this in a religious way at all, but sooner or later, every single one of us is going to leave this planet in one way or the other. And I don't know what's going to happen at that moment. I don't know if there will be a judge or if I will be judged for what I did or what I didn't do, how often I made excuses or how often I was sincere or how often I lied and how often I made up stories. Whatever that is, I don't know. But I want to make sure that in case there was something like that I'm going to be treated very kindly and very smoothly. So I want to have that transition in a smooth way. I do that for me. You get the benefits. But I cannot know. I don't know anyone who really went through the entire process, was dead for 10 years and came back and reported what happened over there. I have no wisdom about that. I have no knowledge. Of course, there are ideas and there are many spiritual teachers who report of some life after life. Then there are others who say there is none. I don't know, and this is not the topic. But I want to make sure that I don't need to use any excuses when it comes to that point. I don't want to take my last breaths to make excuses. Yeah, I didn't do that because... No. I want to live my life that any moment when it's over, and I can be resting truthfully in peace, not because others wish me that, but because I know that I can.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. And I think that can be a good motivation to prompt a self-inventory and spring clean, as you mentioned. And I am motivated by the people in my life that I love dearly. I want them to look at me and know that they can genuinely trust me and rely on me and that I'm being my true self with them. And that's important to me because I didn't feel like I could be my true self for much of my life. And so that's my motivation. I guess it's my close family and friends, with the most important person or people now being my boys, my son and my grandson. If I feel like they can look to me and know that I'm being genuine, that's my motivation for being my best version. Now, that's not putting it onto somebody else. It's me wanting to be the best I can be so that I leave a legacy of inspiring them to be the best they can be. And that's how I look at it, without any sort of thought to the afterlife or what our belief systems may be around that. But I feel like that's going to be a strong driver for a lot of people around the world, is what's happening right now in their lives. Who's watching you? Who's mimicking you? Because there will be somebody watching you and mimicking you. And what kind of message and behavior do you want them to look and see and then copy? And how do you want them to grow up and their belief systems? And for me, that's been a driver. Even in the times where I was messed up and didn't know how to put myself first, he still motivated me to give it the best I could with what I had at the time, and to try and be my best version until I found my own self-worth. And then I realized that I needed to do it for me. I always had that outside motivation as well. And there will be listeners out there who are in that stage of their life where they haven't got it all sorted out yet. They may be still trying to build that self-worth. And so I would say to you, who are the most important people in your life? And you serve them best by being genuine in yourself and being a trustworthy person and exhibiting the behavior that you would want them to exhibit. And I even use my son as like the test now. If I would be happy about what he would do, what he would treat his wife like, then I will take no less than that in my life. And I came to that because I did struggle with my own self-worth for so long, and I let toxic men into my life. And we know that I've got a bit of a checkered past. If you're a new listener, there's plenty of episodes where I talk about some of the things I've been through. But one of the big things that I realized was if I couldn't create the standard for myself, then I had to find a way to create it using something else. And my son is so important to me, and what he thinks is so important to me. That was my standard until I found my own self-worth and self-esteem. Now, why am I talking about this when we're talking about excuses? Because I feel like it all comes back to this inner self issue, this inner work that we need to do. I didn't know about it for a really long time. I didn't realize all of these concepts we talk about on this podcast over the last 142 episodes are almost all of them are things that I've personally struggled with. And my job as co-host is to represent you guys out there in the audience and bring topics to Daisy that I feel somebody might be going through because I went through them and I can't be alone. And find tools that will help you because they would have helped me back then. Now, I'm a different person nowadays. I have very different beliefs. They've evolved over time as I've learnt all these things. And so I urge all of you to go and listen to all of our episodes because I believe there are golden nuggets in every single one of them for all of you out there that will help you make these changes in your life to be your best version. And that's my motivation for doing Bald and Blonde Mindset Evolution, is to spread this inspiration as far and wide as we can because my son and my grandson matter so much to me. I want their world to be better and their grandchildren, my son's grandchildren and my grandson's grandchildren to have a world that is vastly different to the one we have now. And that can only happen if we all as individuals take on the responsibility of it starting within. It's a bit of a monologue, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think, yes, it was Kathi speaking. Fine. Well, I think it is interesting that you put so much value on what others think of you. And I understand in your family setting that your son is very important and then your grandson, the first and so far only grandchild you have. Nevertheless, I think of it as almost an excuse because actually at the end of the day, at the end of your days as well, actually, but at the end of the day, you must be enough for you. And when you know you did enough and you did it well, then there is no other excuse needed. Because let's say your son, also he's human, he could be one day in a bad mood and he could say to you something that he didn't mean, but he's frustrated and you're just there at the right moment, at the right time, and he's shooting at you verbally. When you give it to yourself, no one can ever take it away. And I believe this is one of the great lessons to be learned during this lifetime for every single one of us. So I turn it around. I say, I do it for me because it feels good to me, that I know whenever I go to sleep, I know I did the best I could and even did more. I served more than I could have possibly thought being capable of doing. And I gave even more and I did more and I produced more. And then it does not matter what you think, what my son thinks, or anyone else who is important and dear to me thinks. When I know that I did it, then you can be in a bad mood or you can be maybe finding excuses in me because they will just not resonate when I know and I'm certain that I did all I could based on a standard with integrity.
Yeah, 100%. And I was trying to also express that I've finally got to that place. But until I did, that is what I used as my standard.
Yeah.
And with my track record of toxic men, I needed some sort of standard.
Yes.
At least at the time.
Yeah.
And yes, you know what? I know there are listeners out there that are in the middle of going through that, might be at the beginning of going through that, or might be at the point where we are as well. I know we have listeners from all walks of life, from 88 countries, and that's 88 cultures, and possibly half of that have a second language. And that's such a variance of people and experiences and situations and environments and lives. The mind boggles if you try and think about how we all can possibly relate to each other. And it is, I believe, these topics. I believe that they reach everybody above all of those barriers that we as human beings put in place for ourselves. And that's why I believe we've spread so widely around the globe and continue to spread almost every time we tell you on air how many countries that we've reached. By the time the episode airs, it's usually 4 or 5 more. But that's because we put much work into recording and editing and engineering these episodes for your enjoyment and education and inspiration. And so we hope that today you got something out of this discussion around excuses. I think it was a really good look at it. And as often, we can only touch the tip of the iceberg on these shows because we try to keep them to half an hour. But I think it opens the discussion up. It opens up the thinking cap, the self-look. And we hope it inspires you to do that for yourself, to have a look at your own life and your own behavior and check in with yourself and see where it is you're at and where it is you want to be.
A listener told me the other day, I received a wonderful email and they said to me, well, Daisy, thank you so much what Kathi and you are doing. And I find it now, for me, listening to the episode again after I listened to it, because there's so many things between the words that I didn't hear the first time. And I found that very sweet to let us know that many things are understood in a different way when we listen to it more often. And it's my passion that we do what we do and we continue doing it for sure. And please help us to remain on air. We need your support. And please consider supporting us in all ways possible. Thank you.
Yes, and you can do that by going to boldandblonde.live. There's a support us link at the top of the page. And you can do that by sharing our episodes with everyone you know. My goal this year is to get to 100 countries, and we will need your help to do that, dear listeners. That's it from us for this week. We'll be talking to you soon. We are Bold and Blonde.
Mindset Evolution. Talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening in to the Bold and Blonde Mindset Evolution podcast. Please share our podcast with your family and friends. Together, we make this world a better place. For you, for us, for future generations. Visit us at boldandblonde.live to get freebies, give feedback, and even support us with as little as $1. Talk to you soon.